Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Impact series. Today, our topic is going to be fourth quarter facility management checklist. Again, welcome, everybody. My name is Sergio Pagés. I'm Senior Vice President of Structure Tech, and I'm glad to have everybody on the line listening to this hopefully interesting presentation. A little background on me. I've been with this company, with Structure Tech, for the last 27 years. And the presentation that I'm about to share with you, in addition to my experience with thousands of projects and many organizations that deal with facilities across the globe, it's also a collective wisdom from many people from my firm here at Structure Tech, as well as others that I have worked with throughout the years. So I hope you'll benefit. The main objective for me in this presentation is to help you better prepare as you start thinking about closing your particular year, whether it's fiscal or calendar, and as you start preparing yourself for the following year. I think it's extremely important to be well prepared in any endeavor that you're working on, and certainly the end of the year is definitely an important milestone in your respective jobs. Hopefully everybody got the checklist that, if you haven't, we'll send it to you afterwards. But essentially we've come up with 6 areas that a facility manager needs to consider as they're closing the year. And what we'll do is we'll address each one of those sections as we proceed here. The first one is, how do you close out the current year's projects? Many times, as we're wrapping up the year, we want to make sure that all the projects that we've been working out throughout the year are closing out properly. And probably what I consider one of the most challenging aspects of closing projects is those remaining punch list items that perhaps didn't get done or are in the process of being done, or sometimes you have to carry them, especially if they're weatherproofing type of projects, you have to carry them into the following year. Punch lists are a key component. You want to make sure that you have compiled a very clear list of the items that are remaining by the contractor. A classic example that I've run into is, for example, in paving, if we run into weather, a lot of times the striping of the parking lot may be something you have to wait until the following year. Another challenge with punch list is receiving all the documentation. Sometimes you have to really push the manufacturers and the contractors to ensure that all the paperwork is in and you have all the warranties in place that that particular project relates to. Other components of closing out is obviously doing the proper inspections, whether it's by the consultant, architect, engineer, or the manufacturer. Sometimes just organizing that it can be a challenge. And as a facility manager and with your team, you want to ensure that your team and yourself are pushing all these different stakeholders in the project to make sure that those punches are done in a timely manner. A lot of times the projects go really well, but then the last portion of it's what gets delayed. Other topics related to this, make sure you're ensuring that the warranties are are clear as far as whether they're 5 years, 3 years, 10 years, whatever that time frame is, and that you have them on file. The other is making sure you collect all the lien waivers. You don't want to get any surprises on your particular building after the projects have been done. And then make sure you take time to reflect on the project team, and we'll get into that a little bit later, but being able to evaluate all the different stakeholders that work on your project, whether there's the contractors, the consultants, engineers, architects, and even your own team, to ensure that we capture as much information about what went right, what went wrong on those particular projects for this year. And then lastly, did we meet budget? This is obviously a very important step on closing the year on your projects. Did the bids actually match what was paid? Did we get all the change orders incorporated? Were there any surprises? And then if there were, why did that happen, so that you can plan and be better prepared for the following year. The next part of this exercise is, okay, do I have any budgets remaining? Many times towards this end of the year time frame, I will get calls from different clients that we work with, and they will be concerned about budgets that are remaining. Perhaps you came under, or you got an overflow of funds that need to be used. So the question is, are there any remaining projects that perhaps we can squeeze in the last quarter? Are there any assessments that have been done that have highlighted needs for the facilities that perhaps we can squeeze into this, this last portion of the year? And then lastly, is there anything we can do to prepare, especially for those of us who are in the northern parts of the globe, where winters can be very rough? Are we ready to embark in those challenging climates? And perhaps I can bring in contractors to do some maintenance, some emergency repairs, investigate any leak locations. That's the time of the year that you want to do that before you get into the cold temperatures for the winter. And then obviously the next step, and some of you may do this ahead, but it's, okay, how am I going to submit my needs for the following year? How am I going to prepare good budgets that I can then get approval for the following year? And, how do we collect that information? So the first step is, obviously, we want to gather all the data that I've gotten from different consultants or different engineering firms, or even my own team, as far as the needs, the priorities for the following year. And we highly recommend that you do an assess or perform a facility assessment, and then look at your condition indexes. And what do I mean by condition index? Here's an example of a condition index that we use. This scale shows you an index from 0 to 100. Obviously, the way it works is anything that's below a 50, those are your high priorities. Those are the systems that are in poor condition and need to be addressed the following year. So let the conditions drive the recommended budgets that you're going to need for the following year. Another illustration of the same index, here we have it in more of a graphical format. As you can see, I have a group of facilities, and the different codes represent what assets are in good conditions, what assets are not in good condition. So, for example, the green, it's all in pretty good shape after the condition assessment has been performed, and anything that you see in red or orange are systems that we need to at least consider for the following year's budget requisitions that we will need. Just to go through a few other items in our checklist after we've done the facility condition assessment is calculate what we call a risk exposure index for further prioritization. Now, what do we mean by that? So perhaps you have a condition assessment, but how does that align with the mission of the organization? Is this, for example, if you did an assessment on your parking lots or on your roads, those roads that are in poor condition critical to your facility, so it can put the facility at risk? So, for example, if you're in a hospital environment and the main road where all the emergency trucks come in or the emergency ambulances is in very poor condition, you want to make that a priority. However, if it's a road that is basically overflow for employees, perhaps that can wait. So again, look at not just your condition, but also how does that impact the operations of your facility. And then perhaps you want to review other applicable indexes. Obviously, one of them is safety. If some of the items that you need to consider are going to be impacting a life safety concern, you want to make those into a priority. And then for those of you who are in the U.S., another concern is OSHA recently came up with a new set of rules for fall protection. So perhaps some of those projects need to take priority. Have you done a complete assessment on all your OSHA requirements for this year? And therefore, those should be part of your exercise as well. Another variable is any warranty expirations. If you have, for example, some roofs that are about to expire, it's probably a good time for you to start planning an inspection before the warranty expires, so that you can take care of some repairs that could be free for you from a perspective that the warranty is still in place. Other factors, obviously many of us have emergency funding that relates to leaks. Look at your emergency spent last year, allocate at least the same amount or reconsider based on the gravity of some of those emergency spends. Maybe they're not repeatable. And then prioritize your spending using that data, and then we recommend at least mark it up by 15% so that you can make sure that you're covered. And then obviously we need to discuss this with the powers that be. We're highlighting a CFO as an example. How do you create those budgets in such a way that they're aligned with the objectives of your CFO or your board? That's very important. Many of us have challenged getting budgets approved, and I think as one of my colleagues shared with me, that a lot of times it's not because we don't have the data, but it's just primarily we're not able to articulate it well and make a really strong business case to justify the funding. So that leads me to the next point, and that is, many organizations are looking for a return on investment. If I replace this road or this particular roof, or if I do this facade renovation, what's the impact of my facility? How do I articulate that to management so that they will approve my budget? So And then the other topic is, where do we put these funds? And I wrote here, it's either restoration versus major capital. Perhaps a better description will be maintenance dollars. Is that going to come out of my operation and expenses, or is it going to come out of major capital? And many times, the way you package your request can go either way. Obviously, it depends on your own company's accounting methods. And then just, again, putting a good example or a good program justification example. How do you build a case? And I'm going to illustrate this particular case. You may not be able to read it carefully, but this is just a quick one-page example of a significant roofing project that was in the, at least for this particular company, it was significant to spend up to $2 million in a roof replacement. So this particular document here explains the justification, the scope, and what are the deliverables and what are the benefits to the facility. So again, building a good case so that you can make sure that your budgets are going to be approved for the following year. And then how do you submit this budgets? Again, gather all the information, make sure you have all the data, and make a good, strong case for that. And of course, again, any company has very specific financial requirements, and you have to abide by those in order to make sure that the budgets get approved. So once we have that information, and you do know some of the projects that are going to be executed the following year, how do you prepare for those next year's projects? And some recommendations and best practices that we've seen is ensuring that you have the allocated time and resources to prepare clear construction specifications early before the projects rather than later, so that you have good definition of what's going to be performed on that project. And then the question is, are those specifications, should they be developed by your team? Perhaps you have the resource internally to engineer the project's requirements, or perhaps you need a team outside of you, an engineering firm or a consulting firm or an architect to help you prepare those specifications. Another consideration that you should use in terms of preparing for next year's projects is, put a schedule together. And something that a lot of people miss is early bidding. And what do I mean by that? Especially for those of us who are in the northern states of the United States, the climate has a huge impact on when some of the projects can be done, especially for outdoor projects. So therefore, the earlier you're able to bid your work, the better chances you have of getting good contractors involved. You'll be able to save considerable funding or out of your budget. It will cost less. Here's an illustration that after doing a number of studies across different projects, you can see that this is an analysis of what's the impact of bidding early. If you bid it, the earlier during the year, the savings are much better. Where if you bid it in the middle of the summer, which is when a lot of institutions are doing their exterior work, it's going to cost you more. So taking taking that into consideration, making sure that management understands that you need to prepare those bids early in the year to get best pricing and best availability from your contractors. And then next is select the delivery method. How are you going to do this project? Are you going to do it traditionally, the design, bid, build process? That's very traditional. Another method could be design build. Perhaps you're going to hire one entity that's going to do the whole project. Or perhaps you're going to do a construction management approach where you will hire a construction manager to execute the work. And again, that's going to be very relevant in selecting the proper team that's going to do the work. And in order to select the right team, you want to make sure you have a good process of vetting the contractor or team members that are going to be part of this. What I have here is an illustration or a checklist that we have developed internally to vet contractors that are going to be performing or even invited to bid to our projects. As you can see here, one of the key components of that vetting process is safety. Does that contractor have a good culture in terms of safety? Do they have a good track history on projects that they have done in the past? And making sure that they're capable of meeting the standards of our company for safety. Another consideration is schedule. Can they meet the schedule that we want? Let's say you're in the school, in the business of schools, you want the work to be done right before school starts, which typically starts in September. So those are the questions you want to make sure that they're clear about. The construction requirements, if they understand the specifications clearly, are they clear about the scope of work, and have they done this before? Again, just making sure that the contractor that you're intending to use on your projects are capable of performing the work. So as you continue closing the year, another aspect of the process is to make sure that all your financials are closed out. What does that mean? Well, do we have all the invoices coming in? Gosh, the last thing we want is to get invoices after the year's been completed, and then we get a surprise cost, and it creates a lot of havoc. So we use the term push and pull. You push your vendors. The vendors need to also push to make sure that they're getting paid. You'll be surprised how many people forget this step, and it becomes problematic in the following year. The next is, do I need to renew the vendor approval process with some of the vendors that we're working with? And I highly recommend that you evaluate their performance. We have a process called a contractor rating form where we rate the performance of contractors on our projects right at the end of the project, so that we can make sure that we are going to continue to work with them, or perhaps we're going to revisit our relationship with them. And then finally, how do we make sure we prepare our facilities team for the upcoming year? Revisiting the goals and objectives for your department. Look at the different lessons learned throughout the years, and what is it that we want to improve this coming year. Perhaps we had some challenges in safety. Perhaps some of the scope that we defined this year didn't work out. There's always room for improvement, and the more you evaluate your own team and set up, new goals for this year, and determine how do we overcome any obstacles that we had next year. It's ideal. And then schedule, as part of that process, schedule review, planning sessions with them. Another topic might be, do we need additional staff? Do we need to restructure some positions? Perhaps some of the project managers that we had in our projects didn't perform up to par. We need to reassess their positions, or perhaps we need to send them for additional training, or perhaps that we have to let them go if we just cannot work with them. And then, of course, training, developing new technologies that we need, perhaps, or software systems are not up to par. Perhaps our processes need to be improved. Get systems that will allow us to have better communications within our facilities, with our vendors, and even with our own administration. So hopefully this is a short session, but we wanted to at least cover some highlights of what are some of the things that we need to make sure we're covering when we're closing the year. And bottom line is I'm proud of being a father of 2 Eagle Scout sons, and I spent many years in Eagle Scouts, and this is the slogan that we use, to always be prepared, and that's what I'm encouraging you to do with this checklist that we have shared with you.